Welcome to Choppin It Up, a podcast powered by Journey, where we talk about freight, how people got to where they are, and their career journeys, pun intended. All right, let's chop it up. Hello. Welcome to Choppin It Up by Journey. My name is Will Jenkins, CEO and founder of Journey. And today I'm joined by one of my favorite people, Kevin McMaster, SVP of Sales and Operations at Flock Freight. Kevin, thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks a ton for having me, Will. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, man. I'm trying to channel my inner Kevin. I got a little shadow here, you know, a little shadow.
This
with the
is a clean shave for you, man. This is clean. This is clean.
I like it. Looking sharp for the podcast.
Ignore the grays. Ignore the grays. You don't want those.
Okay, I'll let them be, man. So, I've known you for 11 years now. Kind of crazy. Been a long time. Have a ton of respect for what you've built, and also I learned a lot from you over the years, but specifically during my early time at Coyote. So I'm excited to dive into your story here, talk a little bit about your time in the space. But before we get going, two things. I want to hear your fun fact and then just a quick 10,000 foot overview, and then we'll get into the fun stuff.
All right, cool. Man, fun fact. I guess I'll share this one because it's one that probably people wouldn't expect about me. I actually immigrated to the States as a 13-year-old. I was born in Germany, raised in Switzerland, and then my family reloaded to Ann Arbor, Michigan, of all places.
Wow.
So that was, I'd say that's probably something you don't get based off my name.
No, I loosely knew that, but I didn't know it was when you were 13. I thought it was younger.
Yeah. No, my dad's an American. My mom is Swiss. He actually went to study abroad at age 19 on a scholarship and then didn't leave for, 32 years. So didn't meet my mom right away, but really, was focused on school and just had an opportunity there that kept him there, and then met my mom at 26. So she and I always joke. I mean, he's more Swiss than we are because his German's much better than ours is today.
Dude, that's crazy, man. I love it. It's really cool to think about having spent, 13 years is a long time, like young age until you're a teenager. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah. No, I remember it vividly. And, what's cool is I still talk to my friends from growing up today.
That's sick.
So
I love it, man. So give us a quick 10,000 foot overview. We're going to peel back some layers from the beginning of the story in a few, but give us a quick rundown on your background.
Yeah. So look, I fell into transportation like many of us back in 2007. I went to Indiana University. And I'll be frank, I didn't really know what the heck I was going to do when I graduated. But, the job market at that time was a little odd. And I basically had three options. Option one was to go work with my old man, which I learned from firsthand experience. I didn't want to do. Love the guy, but not for me. And option two is to put on a suit every day and become a consultant and move my life to Germany, which at the time, look, it sounds super appealing, but did not appeal to me at that point in time. And the last and, least likely option was actually to join a company called Real-Time Freight. And what Real-Time Freight was a business-to-business marketplace connecting carriers directly to shippers. So that was really my introduction into freight. I worked there for about 9 months, and was really a good introduction for what this industry was. And of course, living in Chicago at that time, I had a ton of friends that were brokers.
Yeah.
And I was like kind of close to that, but I was like envious of them because I was like, man, this brokerage world sounds so cool. And then I actually, ended up selling to some of those folks. And that's how I really got acquainted with folks at Command and Coyote and, Echo, XPO, et cetera. I ended up joining Coyote in January of 2008.
Sweet.
They happened to be a customer of mine at that point in time, and was a great opportunity to join, a hyper growth business. And what helped too is I had some friends who, had worked there for a little bit before me, which really just sold me on wanting to join that company. So I ended up joining them as one of the first 70 employees, and then stuck around there for the better portion of 12 years. Did a variety of roles, as you would within any startup. Like, I've been a customer rep, a carrier rep, ops.
I want to get real into the weeds, because I didn't get to Coyote until 2014, so 6 years after you, and I'm sure the infrastructure and just growth of the business had to be really, really cool to watch from 08 to 14. So let's attack that. So real-time freight for a bit. Let's get into the nitty-gritty, and then I actually want to go back even earlier, and like, what was young Kevin interested in before he started getting into freight? So let's actually start there. So before you started getting into brokerage, and I know you're talking about figuring out what you wanted to do when you were a kid growing up in Switzerland, like what did you like to do? Like, what stuff was interesting to you?
Man, soccer is life, right? Nice. Played a lot of soccer, a lot of mountain biking, and tennis. Tennis is something that I kept once we immigrated to the States too. Played that throughout my junior year of high school. I think like those were like the main things. Of course, I was living right on the border of Germany, Switzerland, and France, in a little town called Kaiser, which is right on the Rhine River.
Yeah.
And so, like traveling for me all over Europe was like the norm, right? It's like if we, like growing up in Michigan, we'd go to the UP, or we would go to, like a destination that was a drive away, right? We might go to Chicago. When I lived in Kaiser, like we would go to Germany to buy groceries because it was cheaper, right? Or on the weekends, like my folks might want to have a good glass of wine. We might pop over to France and, go experience that. So, but the community that I grew up in was very unique because it allowed me to be very independent at an early age. I was given a key and a shoelace that went around my neck, and my mom just said, "Hey, you got to be home at X time. Where are you going to be if I need to find you?" And it was typically the soccer fields, the tennis courts, even a little bit on the basketball courts too. But that's typically where you could find me. And what was cool was the community we lived in actually had sidewalks that were above ground. So I never was, on the same level as a car. So I could walk to school. I could walk to our local grocery store. I could go to, playgrounds, soccer fields, etc., without ever being near a car, which, was a very unique way of growing up, especially when you compare it to what life in the U.S. is like.
Man, that's awesome. I love to travel. I spent a lot of time in Europe. I have spent, but specifically in summer of 23, I went to some places that you recommended and enjoyed them thoroughly. So it's really cool to think about young Kev bopping around Switzerland. I love it. Love. Okay, so when you came to the States at 13, straight to Grand Rapids?
Ann Arbor.
I'm sorry, yep. Ann Arbor. Okay, talk to us a little bit about that up until the point that you got to school, and then we'll get into the Coyote days.
Look, it was one of the scariest and hardest things I've ever done in my life, and I would do it 100 times over. It shaped who I am today. I think we all know this, but kids are tough, and change when you're in that age is really tough, right? The school system in Switzerland is vastly different than the school system here. And so, I went from having a lot of friends to having nobody. And I'm an only child, so I didn't have a sibling that was there to like kind of have my back and that I could at least like commiserate with.
Right.
So, I went to middle school. I knew nobody. That's scary, and was definitely hard on me as a kid. Like it was interesting because some people were very interested in getting to know me, and they were very intrigued because, how many people do you meet from Switzerland? And other people took advantage of the fact that, I had a very thick accent. English is my second language. I was not fluent in English when I got here. I did, have English as a second language courses like all day long. I didn't understand what the culture really was, right? Like I vividly recall one of the first days of me going to middle school, I just sat down at a table, right? Like I didn't know that, like I just thought it was open seating. I sit down at a table and people kind of looked at me crooked, like who are you and why are you sitting here?
Yeah.
And what I found out like much later was I sat down at the popular kids table, and obviously I'm not a popular kid.
Yeah.
So, I think it was tough for my parents to watch too, but I look back on those experiences, Will, and I would honestly not change one thing. That I think really prepared me for life, in general. And honestly, like I like to do hard things. And so, that was really hard, but overcoming that gave me really just the confidence to kind of bluntly say, and I don't mean to be arrogant in any type of way, but that I can do anything that I set my mind to. I just got to believe, and I got to work my ass off to do it.
I respect that thoroughly, because I think most people that achieve at any clip that is worth noting have been through some adversity and have had things that were incredibly challenging. And the option is you can let those things tear you down and it gets really, really tough, or you can look at them as a way to help you grow. And to be able to do that as a young teenager moving to a new country and not speaking a language is a very unique vantage point. So respect.
Thanks, man.
Of course, dude. Of course. So where'd you go to school again?
Indiana University.
You Hoosier. Love it.
Yeah.
So
go Hoosiers, baby.
What'd you study?
Well, you want to know what I started to study and what I ended up with?
Yes, that's the good story.
So, all right. My dad's a PhD. My mom is an MBA. So expectations in terms of school, very high, right? I'm not that way. I went to college kind of because that was the expectation. But I went to college to study business and go into the Kelley Business School. And that lasted a semester. Well, I should say almost 2 semesters, but in my second semester, I made the decision to not stay in Kelley. And the reason why is it's extremely, extremely competitive. It's super challenging, and I'm very social. And for me, like that balance between what I was dedicating to school versus what I wanted to do in my social life just didn't align. Yeah. And I didn't really have like the care to want to dedicate my life to school. So I bailed on that. And I ended up majoring in telecommunications management as well as German. So yeah, telecommunications was something that interested me, right? Like really like what I was interested in was like selling ad space for TV or for radio.
Interesting.
Or at least that's what I thought I was interested in at the time.
Yeah.
And then it also helped that, one of my best friends, still to this day, happened to be a telecommunications major. And I give all the credit to him, man. Like he got me through college.
Love that.
And, so we kind of rode, we were thick as thieves. He was actually just visiting me a couple weekends ago. And so, it's, I'm not the studious type. I like to grind. I like to make money. And that's kind of what my motivations are. So, a little less of the going to class type of person.
Hey, I get it, man. You figured out the stuff that you liked and you've been able to run with that. It's not always necessarily very, very locked in on the studies. So I get it.
Yeah.
So you get done with school. You start at Real Time Freight. You end up at Coyote. So now Coyote 2008. What was Coyote 08 like 2 years into the business?
Man. Well, we were in a teeny little office at 191 East Deer Path that I'll never forget.
Wow.
It was one of the most awful commutes I ever did in my life. But it was worth it. Like the energy was electric. The culture from the get-go was very, very cohesive. Like I felt very supported. It was bizarre to me at that point in time that like even the CEO, Jeff Silver, cared to have a relationship with someone like me who is entry level. Right. And I met some very influential people that are still a big part of my life today. Like Dave Herbert is the GOAT and will forever be the GOAT.
Love that guy.
And, he's changed my life single-handedly. I still talk to that man every single week today. And, beyond just being a mentor to me, he's someone who has taught me a lot of things just about life in general, and also like about what it means to be a man of integrity. And there are plenty of other folks at Coyote who had, significant influence on me, but, I am a competitor, and, you kind of size up the room, right?
Always.
And back then, like
Always.
we had a few pods, and in my mind, I was like, well, I'm like the new kid on the block. I got to earn my stripes. I got to make a splash here.
Were you in carrier sales when you first started?
Yeah. Yeah. So I started in carrier sales. I was on the Big 12 South team at the time. I certainly got a ton of help. My manager at the time is a guy named Tom Fenwick, who spent a ton of time helping me learn this business. And there's definitely, a few other folks on that team who were sales reps at that point in time that, really helped me understand what the business was. And, I think one of the best things that happened to me at that time was I was just kind of thrown in the water and told to like figure it out. And hey, like if you don't know, ask, but then retain that information and leverage it to get better every single day.
Totally.
And like what I loved was just like the speed, like the agility, the intensity. And then, what also helped is I saw some people around the room whose cars I saw in the parking lot. And I was like, man, I want to make money like these guys are making.
Totally.
Right. And obviously it also helped that Coyote was growing like crazy. It was absolutely a fire drill, 24/7, 365. And our attitude was, it didn't matter what day of the week, what time of the day, or whatever it was. You prioritized your carriers and your customers above all else. And that's kind of what shaped my early formative years in my career.
I mean, it's huge, right? To be able to work at an organization that puts service and culture and taking care of people. So you've got internal, we got to take care of our team, make this the right environment for the people that are here busting their tails to make this business work. And then externally, you have your carriers, your customers. When the bar is set so high, man, it's in your blood, right? You don't know anything else. And so your expectations are through the roof because that's what's been created. And that was the first thing that you ever saw inside of a brokerage. So, it's kind of hard to go back. You go see something else like, this is not what I'm used to. It's not how we do business.
Yeah. And what also helped was like when I would get home, one of my roommates at the time was a Coyote. Another one worked for a company called Strive.
Wow. Throwback.
One of my other like good buddies was, at Command, another one at CH. And like, for me, it was just like, I want to crush all of you guys.
Oh, yeah.
Like Coyote has to be front and center. And so it definitely spilled over into my personal life. Right. And I mean, this from being in Chicago and living and breathing it every single day. Like, you might be at the bar and you might be surrounded by like 20 people that all work in the space.
Easily.
So like all of that kind of like really embedded me in this industry. And honestly, it's why I fell in love with it. I really did.
Totally, man. So when you think about the things that you were able to, or the roles that you had during time at Coyote, let's kind of go through those because you're in an incredible position now as you all continue to build Flock and you've had just crazy experience up to this point. What are some of the different things that you did role wise and some of those responsibilities?
Yeah. So look, my background is probably a little bit different than a lot of folks. I've spent a lot of time on the carrier side as an individual contributor and as a leader, but I've spent almost an equal amount of time on the customer side. And whether that be acquisition or retention, doing those jobs. So, early on, I started as a carrier rep. I then had a stint over in the Netherlands for, Coyote's European Venture 1.0, where I helped integrate an office. And then when I came back, did a little bit more carrier repping, but then there was a need for customer sales reps. And I was kind of voluntold that I'm now a customer sales rep.
Love that.
Yvonne Belk is another name that is very influential in my career.
Love Mama Belk.
Yep. And I was her ops rep, and she taught me like how you treat customers and what they like and what they don't like. And, over the course of time gave me more and more and more trust until I was ready to actually start my own book of business. And so, again, carrier, like that was like, I think that's like my natural like place. Like I love it because while you do need to like sell, you're negotiating most of the time.
All the time.
Right? Or you're convincing. As to, customer sales is definitely a different sales cycle. And I think it was a lot harder for me at the beginning. And I really enjoyed that challenge. Like I was on the BD team at Coyote, and I did that, for a handful of years before, honestly, Coyote made the decision to, at one point, really drive a more narrow focus so that we could truly be the best at dry van procurement, right? I had thought I was smarter than people, and I was chasing flatbed freight because I like the margins on steel coils. Like, why not?
Why not?
But when we kind of, switched directions, that was hard on me because I was losing a commission check that I was depending on. And I always kind of had my mom and dad in the back of my mind saying like, hey, go get your MBA. They wanted their only child to be enabled to go get the education that they felt like I deserved. And they were super generous and being willing to pay for all of that. Right. So I feel super fortunate for that. But I, at that point in time, I did say like, look, I don't want to rebuild and chase like, dry van truckload at the time. The margins were smaller. The space was, I won't say like as saturated as it might be today, but it is, it was still like the thing that most people wanted to sell and felt comfortable selling. So I said, you know what, maybe mom and dad are right. I'm going to study for the GMAT. I'm going to do this. And I shared that with a mentor of mine because I had, I'm not a person that does well with test taking and things of that nature. It's just, that doesn't come easy to me. So I had a full on tutor. I had classes, right, that I was taking outside of work. And my tutor was Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings. And I worked at that point, like 1 to 2 Saturdays a month. So I told my mentor at the time, hey man, like I can't commit to working these Saturdays as often. Like, I have these sprints with, for the GMAT. Sorry, I misspoke. I said that to my boss at the time.
Yeah.
Well, that information got back to my mentor. And what I didn't know was that my life was about to change. Dave Herbert, heard that I was, wanting to go back to school. And what I didn't know is that he was about to move back up to Chicago because they were centralizing the carrier sales organization. And he gave me an olive branch, man, which I'll never forget because it was a fork in a road that I took that changed my career trajectory. And he was starting a West Coast carrier sales team. And, I was kind of nudging him like, hey, man, I've been here a few years. Like, I'm very pro Coyote. I love this company. I know everything inside and out. Like, give me a chance in leadership. Like, it's what I want. And he said, like, look, if we go do what we say we're going to do, which is build this really robust West Coast carrier sales team, then maybe down the road that will exist for you. But right now, I can't give you that. And I thought to myself, like, one, I trust Dave fully, still do to this day. And two, like, what do I have to lose, right? In carrier sales, like, I can wrestle my way into commission.
Yeah.
And I needed money, right? I had bills that were due. Like, don't for a moment think that my parents continued to like help me out when I'm not in school. Like, my dad paid first month's rent when I moved to Chicago and said, good luck, kid, like, go figure it out.
Respect.
And so I said to Dave, yeah, I'll do it. Let's do it. Well, I never went back to grad school.
No.
I made a very healthy and comfortable living in carrier sales. And for a long time, and this kills me to say, but I got to give the man credit. James Anstey was number one, and I was fighting tooth and nail to beat him in volume.
Yeah.
I never beat him. I got very, very close, but I never beat him. And he's another one of these like very influential people in my life. I got sat next to him when this team was created, and like, man, you want to talk about one of the best brokers in the game.
When I started, he was an absolute dog.
Yeah, hands down. And so you have to envision where, the office in Lake Forest was expanding. We got this space that we called the arcade, because I think it was an old arcade. I don't recall. But our team was in what was called the fishbowl. We were kind of like separated from everybody else because the space was kind of strange. But so I was next to him, and I just copycatted every single thing that he would do, because I saw the success he had. And in my mind, I was just like, I'm going to do everything that guy does.
Yeah.
Because for me, it was like, I want to emulate number one, and I want to beat number one. And, there was 1 month where he took some time off where I was about to beat him. And he may not admit this. You'll maybe have to fact check this one.
We'll see.
But I'm pretty sure I motivated him to come back to work because I was going to get him. And then he comes back and, of course, crushed me. But
hey, man. Well, I love the
very,
attitude,
very
man.
fond memories.
Yeah.
Very fond memories.
Yeah. So I want to spend some time quickly before we pivot into what you're building at Fluck now, but I want to spend a little bit of time on the higher level leadership stuff. So during your time at Coyote, got to lead. Tell me a little bit about that, and then I want to talk about your transition to Fluck.
Look, Dave always said to me, you got to do the job you want before you have the job you want. I took that very serious. So yeah, I wanted to sell at the highest level, but he also spent time helping me understand what leadership is, what the tasks are, right? Like all like the tactics, but also like, how do you build buy-in with a group of people that maybe aren't that bought into you, right? Like you got to remember, like I was on the customer side for a few years, and I just kind of jumped back in the carrier pool. So I had to like reprove myself to all those guys. And that team was one of the most competitive teams at Coyote. And so it was very much about building meaningful relationships, demonstrating that you're a team player, but also, organizing like and executing against what the business needed, and not just what was good for Kevin's pockets and being kind of like just this lone wolf type. So Dave helped me immensely during that time in my career and told me things that I needed to start doing. Right.
Like
and
what?
I mean, it was like, hey, the $10 books are still a problem today. Yeah. Right. All of the loads that people don't naturally gravitate towards. So we struggled like hell to cover those every day. And he was like, hey, I need you to own this. I need you to work with your teammates to own this. Right. And meanwhile, I'm like, yeah, man, this is kind of a weird place to be, because like I'm competing with them and you're asking me to tell them what to do or ask them to do something that they inherently aren't going to make a lot of money on. And he's like, that's exactly what I'm telling you to do.
Correct.
Go figure it out.
Yeah.
And look, like I was really fortunate that all of us were a super tight knit team, right? James Anstey, Phil Wenzel, right? Like absolute freight legend.
These are legends in the game.
Casey Prizeman.
Yes.
Pete Hughes was in the room. Ashley Riney came like not right at the beginning, but came after that. Trying to think of who all the early on guys were. Anywho, I know I'm missing some important people, and if you're watching this, I do apologize. But but it was about building camaraderie, and it was about making sure that like you guys were running towards the same goal together. And sometimes that meant doing really hard things or things that didn't make your pockets happy.
Yep.
But we did it because like we cared about the team. and what we were accomplishing for Coyote at the time.
I feel like you taught me that very early on, and you weren't even my manager at Coyote when I was a carrier rep. So I started January 2014. I was on the Southeast Reefer team, and I was hungry.
I remember.
I was hungry. I wanted to book as much freight as I could. And as soon as they told me that you still got paid to cover freight, regardless of if it went into your region, just like, find good carrier partners, I'm finding good carrier partners. I remember I had a carrier that was dedicated on some of the worst West Coast loads you had. Anheuser-Busch, we were underquoted. They were just really tough to cover. And you and I would Slack every day. You're like, hey, is that like carrier available? I'm like, yeah, like they can cover it.
Bro, we were barking. We weren't slacking.
Oh my God, you're right. I'm tweaking.
How dare you?
Honestly, how dare I? The shame. We were barking back and forth, covering the worst freight that the West got. I'm like, dude, I got it. Like, I got a guy. Like, thank you. I'm covering these awful $10 hollers. But like, you told me that it mattered, right? Because I wasn't booking a ton. I was brand new, but like that started to get the volume going. I started thinking differently about procuring capacity. I'm like, okay, well, it's $10, but it's like 50 loads a month. So, okay. Like,
listen, and I think where a lot of that came from for me too was when I first joined the West Coast team, we had all this local LA freight that no one wanted to book because it was all $10 books. But the way that I saw it was like, man, we got like 20 to 50 of these a day. If I lock them all up, and this is before we had all like the tech of auto tendering and all that jazz, right? I mean, you see an opportunity. To me, it was more of a volume game, right? Because like Dave always said to me, if you go and book the volume, the money will come.
Always does.
And so, no, but I remember vividly when you were doing that, and I was like, man, that's my guy. Like, immediate respect, immediate, like, hey, like, I want to bring you into like my circle, right? Like, and yeah, you're not on my team, and that's cool. Like, you were, I think you were on Juan Everty's team back then, right? Or was it
Joe Rad's Southeast Reefer team. Yeah.
That's right. Because Juan was West Coast.
Yeah.
But I remember like being like, man, like, I always looked when new classes came out. It was like the draft.
It's always the draft.
Right?
Yeah.
And I wasn't like mad that I didn't get you, but I was kind of mad. Totally. I was trying to do like a backdoor deal and get Joe to trade me a Will for someone else, man,
That would have been electric. Absolutely electric.
Unstoppable.
Yeah, man. So it's really cool to think about the team and leadership dynamics, right? Because long term, that served the organization and the team very much. But in the short term, it may have seemed like, man, I'm not making a lot of money, or maybe this isn't the best thing for me. And it was certainly the best thing for the org to be able to grow and add market share and build network density, things of that nature. So pivot to Flock Freight, right? You all are building an incredible organization, taking a very different tech focused approach to shared truckload. And there have to be some similar, really, really similar dynamics that say, okay, this may be really tough today and I may not like it, but it's what I need to do to push the org forward. So I kind of want to understand, how that pivot occurred and then some of what you and the team are working on today.
Yeah. So look, leaving Coyote is one of the hardest things I've done. I met my wife there. I met some of my best friends there, right? Like, and not just best friends, but, my leadership team of like Drew Herpick, Pat Campbell, Dave Herbert, like these are guys that I was really close with, right? Like we've gone ski trips together and spend time outside of work together. And I knew that was unique and special because a lot of my friends from college are not in this space and they never had that experience. So, look, like this is nothing against UPS at all, but like with acquisitions, things start to change, right? The culture for me, and again, I don't think this is applicable to everyone, but from a culture perspective, the ability to just be agile, creative, like fail fast, right? Like it wasn't like completely taken away, but it wasn't the same anymore. I didn't have as much autonomy as I wanted. And I wanted to like keep going, right? Like, I didn't think we were actually like done.
Yeah.
That mixed with, I was also ambitious, right? Like, I wanted a higher level role and I was getting impatient. And that impatience caused me to look. Conversed with a lot of folks in the space, but also outside of the space. And honestly, I got pretty close to actually like going to Compass and doing something totally different with them. Sadly, like, I thought I had that job in the bag and they ended up not selecting me in the end. But I am endlessly grateful for that moment. It did crush me at that point in time. My wife will tell you that.
Yeah.
But, she kind of said, listen, man, like, we're about to get married this year. Like, you don't got to change everything in our life. Like, we have a good situation. And she had left Coyote at that point in time and started a catering business in Chicago. So I said, okay, I mean, it's maybe a good idea to remain stable. Well, my wife is from Los Angeles originally. And her mom and stepdad were actually living in San Diego at the time. And we spent a lot of time out here because Coyote used to have an office out here too. And so it was an opportunity to be somewhere warm for free and not miss work, right? So we chose to get married down here in Del Mar. And it was June of 2019. I'm at a Lofty Coffee in Solana Beach, California, right? Waiting for a wedding planner. And Charlie Safro sent me a job opportunity on text. And, her and Chad, I worked for directly out of college. Great people. And she said, hey, I think I found like a really amazing role for you. And I'll be frank, and I'm sorry if this upsets anybody, but like, I'm pretty sure I sent back like a throw up emoji because I saw LTL. And when I was selling LTL, like, I hated it, right? Like, I always, like, it was always the stuff that would blow up my truckload customer from wanting to give me more because reways, damages, right? Like, lost in transits, like all of like the tough stuff surrounding LTL. And in my mind, I was like, man, I'm not even really making much money off this.
Right.
So then, our wedding planner runs late. My wife's like, hey, you should just read this job description and like, go read about the company at least. Like, we got time anyway. So we're doing that. And I'm like, whoa, like the job said Chicago, but their headquarters is Solana Beach, California. So I send a pin drop and I'm like, if you can get me in front of this team right now and get me out of a wedding planning meeting, I am game. What I didn't know is that I was about to meet someone who, again, very influential on my personal life and professional life, Oren Zaslansky. He's our founder and CEO. And, what was supposed to be a quick 30-minute introduction to the company turned into a 4-hour deep dive.
No way.
And it was unlike any interview I'd ever had in my life, not just because we synced on like a personal level, but because of how transparent he is. I, of course, had every objection in the book. I'm like, dude, like, you're carpooling these LTLs together? And he's like, well, not just LTL. Like, we actually focus more on like the middle, the 10 to 40 foot space. And I'm like, okay, well, in my past life, I would just give my customers a really, really aggressive truckload rate because like all my carriers love light freight. And he's like, yeah, but like they're paying you truckload. We discount that down for them because they're only paying for the space they're using. Anyways, it got me thinking, and I was like, I mean, this is a real problem.
Absolutely.
Because think about what I just said to you. I'm going to give you a really cheap truckload rate for a load that doesn't need a 48 or 53 footer.
Right.
So it's not a truckload. And you're not going to shove it in LTL either because of the volume breaking points, right? So I was like, yeah, but your tech's not real. And he's like, I'll show it to you. And look, back then we certainly weren't pumping the amount of, pools is what we call them. And it's just carpooling freight together.
Yep.
Right. And skipping the hubs and terminals. But I walked out of there. Obviously, my wife had some colorful things to say to me after ignoring her texts and, phone calls.
That's so funny.
But I said to her, I'm like, get ready. Like, we're moving here. Mind you, this is less than a month before my wedding. She's like, bro, you're crazy.
Crazy.
I'm like, I'm not. I'm doing this. If it's the last thing I do, I will do this. And so we go back to Chicago. I met the rest of the leadership team there. And, I was blown away. I'll be very frank. Like, that early on team that Flock had spoke volumes to me, and it wasn't just Oren that was super welcoming, but it was also our CFO at the time, Pete Price, Peter Friss, who was really kind of running the day-to-day for the business, like everything from, I'm talking like analytics to carrier sales and operations. Min Kim is another, early on Flocker who really sold me on what we're going to go do. And honestly, after that meeting in Chicago, I signed my life away. I said, I'm doing this. I'm going to move.
Let's go.
This will be really uncomfortable and really hard, but like, I just believed in the product that Flock was putting out there. And it was big enough for me that I wanted to go and do this more than anything else that was out there.
So when you think about taking a bet on yourself to go help an organization grow, what gave you the confidence to say, I am equipped to go do this?
All the highly uncomfortable times that I had through the point where I immigrated to, I didn't take leaving real-time freight lightly when I did. I'm pretty sure I shed some tears when I resigned with Chad and Charlie. But then also like all the opportunity at Coyote, you can go look at my LinkedIn. I purposely leave it up because people should see, I think there was one opportunity that I turned down that I might slightly regret, but outside of that, I just always said yes. And it was so uncomfortable every single time, right? Like going from carrier rep to like being a 22-year-old kid teaching grown people in the Netherlands how to use Bazooka.
Wild.
And then like figuring out like what their product, like what Bazooka was missing that they needed. And then again, like building buy-in with like, folks who were like 2x my age to coming back to Coyote USA and kind of starting over again on the carrier side to then going to the customer side and learning that business, right? Like all of it was like uncomfortable. And don't get me wrong, I was scared. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but I'm just going to do it. Shitless when I was making this decision. Because another mentor of mine who's not in the industry said to me, you don't want to change more than one monumental thing in your life per year. Right. And that always kind of just stuck with me. So, wedding, huge, moving,
huge,
crazy, new job. Okay. Like
3 of those
also
things.
Kind of crazy.
Yeah.
3, right? But I just believed in myself. And I think what I also believed in was the fact that like if this didn't work, something else was going to work. But that was like a very minimal bit. And the reason was I was just so damn confident, and I still am today, that what we bring to market is a need shippers have. And there's a benefit for drivers in all of it too.
Absolutely.
So for me, it would like that flywheel effect was just very apparent very early on. And I was scared to go to Coyote when I was leaving real-time freight, and it was one of the best decisions I'd ever made. So I was like, okay, this is just another moment in time. And I'm just making a decision that is going to be one of the best decisions that I ever make for me and my family.
Dope. Wow.
And it's a bet. And that's all it took.
I mean, it's
and I guess, it's also a bit that, like, I knew my wife was never going to move to Ann Arbor, Michigan with me.
Yeah.
And, if we want to have a family and all that jazz, it's a lot easier when you have family nearby. So that, of course, was also attractive, but it was really like the mission and the vision of this company that I just like said to myself, man, if I let this go by, I'm going to regret it. Totally. And I'm not a person who wants to have regrets.
Absolutely not. And it's been really cool to see what you and the team have been able to build during your time there. And just in general, the organization has grown and is a household name now, from not being the organization that it is and, a small blip on the radar to one of the largest and most recognizable players in the space today. I have a question around watching an organization and being part of one. I've been part of co-founding a rocket ship and kind of seeing that build. What was that like on the Flock side, coming in, you'd seen it at Coyote, like, all right, different product, really different value proposition. What was it like building that in the early days?
I was overwhelmed by how much opportunity there really was.
Interesting.
Rigorous prioritization. And also, one of my best friends in the world came on this journey with me after I had committed, which, I don't know, I think some people sometimes think it was different because he actually technically started a week before me, and that person's Justin Turner. And Justin Turner and we worked together hand in hand at Coyote. He was on my team when he initially moved to Chicago from Atlanta.
Crazy.
And honestly, like, he is a mentor. He is a friend. And he is just a beast in this industry, right? And so that gave me added fuel. And he and I are like very similar in how we think and how we compete and how we see the world. And look, like, we were classically trained by the same organization. So, he had taken more risks in his career than I had. But like, when he was leaned in on this, I was like, dude, me and you against the world. And I didn't care what anybody said. I didn't care. People told me when I left Coyote, man, like, what are you doing? Are you sure? Like, this seems like career suicide. And I just don't care. Like, I mean, I shouldn't say I don't care. I will listen.
Yeah.
I will absorb. But I was so convicted. And the fact that, like, a person who I have so much respect for thought the exact same thing, I was like, dude, I might be wrong, but there's no way that both of us are wrong.
Totally. Yeah.
And so, like, early on, it was like us coming in here, understanding this business inside and out, figuring out what our go-to-market actually needs to be, right? And I give him all the credit in the world. He was a very, very big component, if not the quarterback, of getting the go-to-market right. Then it was, like, we worked well together because Justin is one of the best sellers I have ever worked with in my life.
Same.
And I can go figure shit out, right? Like, I like to, like, he would just throw shit across and I'd be like, I got you. No problem. I won't let you down. I'll make sure that internally we move the freight and we do for these customers what we said we would. And look, it wasn't easy. It was really hard. I still remember, like, being in the office together with him at 5 a.m. and still being there at 7 p.m. or whatever time. I remember being the guy at 2 a.m. when we heard that a load might potentially be railed for one of our most important customers to go figure that out, right? But it was about building the infrastructure. And it always, and that's like, I'm not a fool, right? Like, the reason why folks with a Coyote background are attractive hires, especially the early folks, are because we learned from one of the best systems that has ever existed in this industry.
Absolutely.
And so it was a lot about just rigorously prioritizing building the infrastructure, but we also had to sell, right? Like we had to demonstrate growth. Like being a venture backed startup means that you must grow and viciously fast.
Totally.
And so, I'll give all the credit to the team though. This doesn't work with just Justin and I. This worked because people were bought in. People were so aligned with our mission and this vision. And then, we had the ability to recruit like world-class talent to this company at the right time. So I would say like early on, it was just, start overwhelmed, start documenting all of the things that you see, and then start prioritizing. And then have that list and that plan and knock it out piece by piece. Like it's okay to sometimes work in a silo and just attack one thing at a time.
Gotta do it
so
sometimes.
that you don't go look at, 500 unique things that you gotta go fix.
Dope. I agree. So there's a lot to attack here. I actually think we might have to shoot part 2 because I want to dig in even further. And so I really do, man. There's a lot of good stuff here. So we're going to do a part 2.
Man, I told you at the onset, I'm camera shy. This is not me.
Nonsense.
If it wasn't you,
dude,
I don't know that you could get me on another podcast.
I don't know, man. Listen, we're going to need a part 2 because there's a lot of good stuff here that I really feel we're only scratching the surface on. So as we get ready to kind of put a bow on it, 2 things I normally like to end with. Most important thing you think you've learned so far in your career journey. And then the second's going to be your favorite book.
Okay. Most important thing I learned. Man, that is a really, really hard one.
I know.
I've got like 10 of the most important things, but if I distill it down, I think it's about actually just being okay failing. Like, be fearless, do it fast. And like, one of my mentors, and when I say this, if he watches this, he'll know who he is. But do what you say you're going to go do. Even if it's wrong, go do it, learn from it, and then come back to the table and try again. But do it fast and don't do it at the expense of the people, right? Like, and what I mean by that is like, don't go and mess with people's livelihood and things of that nature in the process. Like you've got to protect the people. You've got to protect the business when you do these things. But like, it's okay to not get it right. Like I will tell you today, I've gotten way more things wrong than right. But when I finally get them right, it's bulletproof and it's magic. Totally. And I think the other thing just is like, having really strong relationships with the people that you're in the trenches with. Because I'll tell you right now, the reason why Flock has had success isn't because of me. It's because of this team that is built around me and because of the folks that have chosen to come on this mission with us.
Totally.
So I know I gave you a little more than one there, but
it's good. Still good.
I like coloring outside of the lines.
Yeah.
Most influential book. Very easy. I'm not a big reader.
Okay.
I did read this book more than once, front to back, and it's The 4 Agreements.
Great book.
I, partnered with an executive coach, Malcolm Abner, who helped me through some very challenging times in my career. And that was the first book that we read together.
Really?
And I apply those principles literally all the time.
I love it, man. I love it. That's one of my favorites. Kevin, this has been incredible, man. I really appreciate you taking some time to chop it up with us today, talk about your background and your journey. Congrats on your success and what you and the team have been able to build. And I look forward to peeling back some more layers the next time we chat.
I appreciate you, Will. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. Thank you.